Sorry, my nose is so itchy, the hay fever right now. Hiya, welcome to my April monthly reading wrap-up. I forgot what month it was. I just want to make a quick disclaimer. If you can see, I don't think it's really showing up on camera, but just in case, I do have eczema on my face and neck right now because I got the same brand of moisturizer, didn't realize it was different ingredients, it was a different type of moisturizer, and I'm allergic to it, so it's given me eczema, and the only reason I figured I'd point it out, even if it was visible, normally I would just be like, whatever, but the eczema on my neck does look a little bit, I guess, sus is what the youth say. But to get into this reading wrap up, I listened to 3 audiobooks. I read The Happy Place, and I did start reading Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. I'm not really going to talk about that one because it became available on my library app literally this past week. I am still reading it, and I honestly don't feel far enough along and confident enough to give any sort of synopsis or review so far. I mean, I am liking it so far, but that's pretty much all I can say. But the rest, I'll start off with the first audiobook I listened to, Climate Change is Racist. It talks about how people of color are disproportionately affected by climate change, which I don't think is something that is coming up a lot in conversation. It talks about how climate change is caused predominantly by white people, by Western countries, and by these white politicians and billionaires and people in power. And then it disproportionately affects countries that are predominantly people of color. Like American politicians, for example, will often do things that are harmful for the climate and the planet for capitalistic gain. Remember the Lorax? Anyway, it also talks about how also, like, within Western countries, people of color are disproportionately affected by climate change. And then there's stuff like the California wildfires, when you hear about it, when it's like rich people are being affected and that kind of stuff, but there are wildfires that very often in California that do not make the news. And because of systemic racism, these neighborhoods that are smaller neighborhoods and not Hollywood Hills or wherever, Calabasas, whatever, when they're hit by these wildfires, it's not making news. It's not driving people towards action in the way that it should be. So it was a very, very interesting read. Again, like I said, when the conversation of climate change comes up, I mean, at the surface level, everyone should care about saving the planet, but I think it is not talked about often, because going deeper into issues and being as left as possible is often something especially Western countries, especially America, likes to avoid. So I thought it was a very, very interesting read, and I really enjoyed learning about that perspective. So the next audiobook I listened to was Do Ask, Do Tell. It is a book all about the LGBT plus community, written by a man and a woman who both have different LGBT plus identities. It goes over all different terms and identities, and it also interviews people of various different identities so they can tell their stories. Because of this, because it's coming from people and their personal stories, it is genuinely about like listening and learning, and how really, when it comes to people's identities, just listen to them and their preferences, and like, how can you ever improve, become more educated, that kind of stuff, if you're not whistling, if you're not willing to listen and learn. Like, I know that's such a memed term, but I think genuinely it is the best thing people can do in this kind of stuff. I mean, like, do your own research as well, but like, because again, in my opinion, and I think this book highlights this as well, there are a lot of different identities and preferences within the LGBT plus community, but it's really not hard to learn and be understanding if you are willing to take the time to do so and have that open mind. Kind of to say it in a more succinct way, just listen to people and be understanding about their preferences. It's a lot about also like respect and just compassion for other humans, and like, yes, there are people that are outright bigots that just have prejudices, but there are also, I think, people who are hateful because when they don't understand something, when they're confused, when it's not something that they grew up learning, so it makes them feel like they didn't learn the right thing or they're stupid or whatever, they get angry and defensive. And I think everyone doesn't know something about something, whatever it is. In order to become more educated on things and whatever it is, you have to have that open mind to be willing to learn and not just get defensive because because you didn't know something. Like I said, no one knows everything, and I think if people were more willing to just admit when they don't know something instead of getting defensive so they don't look stupid, we'd have a lot more compassion in this world. Because also it's having compassion for yourself. Instead of getting angry that you don't know something, just accept that you don't know something and say, doesn't necessarily mean I'm stupid or dumb or whatever. I just wasn't aware of that. And the matter of being uneducated on that, or being even sheltered so you didn't know that, admit that so then you can do better. But I digress. Listen to people, be respectful of their identities and their preferences, and you can become a better ally to the LGBT plus community, even within the community, since there are so many different identities and preferences. Okay, the next book I listened to is White Fragility. It is a book that discusses racism and how white people often have a very defensive reaction to discussing racism. It kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just saying, where if someone is confronted with them being wrong about something, or them doing something wrong, doing something racist, a microaggression, whatever it is, they just get defensive because they don't like to admit that they were wrong. Of course, there are just outright bigots. But with this book, it talks about how it is like so much deeper than that as well. It's interesting because it is, I believe, written by a white woman, and because she does talk about in the book how she does these events, and she often does events where, like, at places of business where they're predominantly white, and she'll talk to the people about white fragility and how their unchecked biases and all this kind of stuff, and people get defensive. And like, she talks about stories where, like, if someone points out something racist to like a white woman, she starts crying, and it's like everyone rushes to comfort her instead of the person that she was racist towards. It's just, it goes into that, and it's a very, very interesting read, and I think very important, especially for white people to read, because everyone, I think, and this is something, again, I think people don't like to talk about, and that's also a big part of white fragility, is that people don't like to talk about this stuff, is that everyone has unchecked biases. Everyone has inherent biases that you need to check. I meant more so to word it as everyone has inherent biases that they should not left go unchecked, and not make excuses of like, well, I'm not overtly racist, but like, pause my thought to word it better. Not being overtly racist is not enough. It goes with kind of the book that I read before called How to Be Anti-Racist, of if you're leaving those inherent biases unchecked, then you're not doing enough of the work. And this book is how a lot of people get very sensitive about that. It's kind of funny, not funny, but I knew a white person that read this book years ago and was telling me about it and was getting very, very defensive and very offended by it, and kind of being like, how can you say all white people are racist when it's about, you know, the inherent biases and all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's a bit funny because any sort of analyzation of this book is like, that's the entire point. Like, that's the entire point of the book, is that that's the reaction that white people have. So it's like, do you think maybe you just proved her point? Like, but again, a more succinct summary, it is on white people to check our biases and to build racial stamina in order to have these conversations and not get defensive and offended and all that kind of stuff. I also listened to Unapologetic. This is a very political video. Okay, I'm back, reframed, but I'm here. So it's called Unapologetic, a Black, Queer, and Feminist Mandate for Radical Movements. And it's very much what it says it is. It talks a lot about organizing and like grassroots movements, that's the word I couldn't think of, and all that kind of stuff. I think I really appreciate how it talked about liberalism isn't really left. My opinion, American politics are like right and center right. They aren't very leftist at all. I think it's absolutely crazy when these right-wing politicians call Democrats the radical left, because they're just simply not. It talks about how it is important to tackle multiple issues, not just be like, we're gonna get to that later, because it is very dismissive of minorities often. It also talks about the dismantling of capitalism. So just to name a few things that it goes over. Again, very important if you want to be an ally to Black people, to queer people, and to women. Finally, I did read Happy Place. I have it right here, I can hold it up. But it's Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book is I was gonna say say reconnection. Again, I don't really like to describe things by tropes. It doesn't follow a lot of similar reconnection stories beat for beat and that kind of stuff. It has a different I mean, I think reconnection stories often have a lot of different backstories, but it's not like, oh, I haven't seen you in forever. This couple has been broken up for 6 months. However, the big part of it is Harriet and Wynne, those are their names, have not told their friends that they've been broken up for 6 months. So now they are on their yearly friend trip to a cabin in Maine. It is the cabin of their friend Sabrina's family. So there's Sabrina, Cleo, Parth, and now there is also Kimberly, who is Cleo's partner. And basically, majority of them were housemates in school, and they became close friends. And it was Cleo, Sabrina, and Harriet at first, and Sabrina brought them to the cabin in Maine off the water, and it became Harriet's happy place, hence the name. But to get back to Harriet and Wynne, they have been not necessarily lying, but a lie of omission. They just haven't told their friends that they broke up. Harriet's plan was to tell them on this trip, but when she gets there, Wynne is there, who was not supposed to be on the trip, but Sabrina brought him there because she has to reveal to them that this is their last summer they're gonna be able to be at this cabin. So now Harriet and Wynne feel stuck in their lie because they don't want to ruin the last summer. They haven't been able to find a moment to tell them the truth, so they are fake dating. They have to fake still being together because from their point of view, they don't want to ruin the summer. It's very cute. It's very kind of The Summer I Turned Pretty. I've only seen the show, but it just makes me think of that because of the fact that it's on the water, but it's also a very different story. I've only read one other Emily Henry book. I've talked about The People We Meet on Vacation. I feel like it has a similar style just because, you know, when you read multiple books by the same author, you can really start picking up on their writing style, but it also goes back and forth in time and stuff and has flashbacks, which The People We Meet on Vacation has as well. But I do think that's an interesting way to tell a backstory without it just having like exposition and dialogue, or someone's just like kind of info dumping the character's thoughts about the past or whatever. Having those flashbacks instead is just, I mean, it's a classic way to do it. So again, this is only the second Emily Henry book I've read, but I did like it, and I do think she writes compelling romance stories. Yeah, I definitely want to read more of her books, but overall, while I didn't physically read a ton of books this past month, I think it was a good reading month from what I did listen to and read. And like I said, I'm enjoying Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil as well. It's also just been a super, super busy month, so there's that. But May should be a good one for reading as well, and I'm excited to talk about those books, and just I'm excited for videos to come. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!